Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this year's Doric Wilson Panel, where we celebrate artists from the community where we host our ATHE Conference. So, obviously, this year we're headed to Atlanta, Georgia, and we are very excited to have Paul Conroy and Utoya Leon joining us. My name is Mark Montando. I currently am serving as the graduate representative for the MTDA focus group. August, you can introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm August Henney. I am a second year, going into my third year grad student, scenic design grad student at University of Maryland, and I am the LGBTQ plus panel grad student representative.
And I do want to take a moment to let everyone use the chat to sort of introduce themselves, let us know where you're joining from, provide a land acknowledgement if you'd like to. I'm joining today from Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C., on the ancestral land of the Piscataway people. So yeah, feel free to use the chat to let us know where you're joining from. And then while we do that, I guess we will introduce our esteemed co-panelists here today. And August, I'll let you get started off with Paul.
Sweet. We're very excited to have Paul Conroy here today. He is the founder and producing director, artistic director of Outfront Theater Company, Georgia's LGBTQIA plus focused theater company. Originally from the Boston area, he holds a BA in English writing with a minor in theater from Long Island University, in addition to both a MA in directing from Roosevelt University and an MFA in directing from the University of Ohio. And as a playwright, his original musical, the Ethel Merman Disco Christmas Spectacular, which he also directed, premiered at Outfront Theater Company in December of 2018. Selected directing credits include Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, the musical, The Most Fabulous Story Ever Told, La Cage aux Folles, Xanadu, Kinky Boots, Ruthless, and most recently, Psycho Beach Party. Paul has taught courses in theater at Georgia State University, serves as the board chair for Out Georgia, and recently concluded his 6-year term as a founding member of the City of Atlanta's LGBTQ plus advisory board, for which he chaired the Arts, Culture, and Entertainment Subcommittee. He was named one of Georgia's 100 most influential LGBTQ plus people in 2020. And in 2022, Outfront Theater Company was honored as a Grand Marshal for the Atlanta Pride Festival and Parade. Paul has been featured in the New York Times, the Times of London, and numerous other media outlets speaking about the importance of queer-centered art. Paul is also the co-founder of both Queer Theater Alliance and a Queer-Centered Arts. Paul is also the co-founder of both the Queer Theater Alliance, a international coalition of LGBTQ plus centered theater companies, and the AQUAA, the Atlanta Queer Arts Alliance, which focuses on enhancing Atlanta's vibrant and vital LGBTQ plus focused arts organizations. This October, Paul will be returning to the stage as a performer in Outfront's production of Hairspray, donning full drag to play the villainous Velma von Tussle.
Thank you, August. And now I'll introduce Utoya. Utoya Leon is known to many as the Mactown Thottie, a reference to her hit single on Spotify, which you can stream. Utoya always sets the stage on fire. She's a Black trans traveling showgirl who's always coming to a city near you. One of the show directors and founders of Middle Georgia drag troupe The Tribe, as well as YAL events, Miss Leon has 16 years of performing on stage under her belt, 9 of them being in drag. She loves to entertain, produce, and help provide a platform for up-and-coming performers alongside her drag family. Batteries not included, and hit pads may appear bigger, or may be bigger than they appear. With comedy, live singing, and sometimes controversial original lyrics, Utoya is a good time gal for all the masses to enjoy. A current title holder as well, she is the recently crowned 2024 Mixed Peach Pit All-Star and plans on setting her sights on more crowns this year. Utoya's performances are not just about glitz and glamour. They are a celebration of resilience, diversity, and the power of self-expression. Her ability to connect with audiences through her dynamic stage presence and captivating performances has earned her a loyal following. Whether she's belting out a soulful ballad or delivering a side-splitting comedic routine, Utoya's versatility as a performer shines through. Her dedication to her craft and her community is evident in every show she puts on, making her a beloved figure in the drag scene. As she continues to break barriers and inspire others, Utoya's star is undoubtedly on the rise, and her journey is one that many, including all of us in this room, will eagerly follow. All right. So today, what we're going to do is just ask a series of questions and then start a conversation with Paul and Utoya. We'll start with questions about their careers, just to get to know them, find out more about their perspective. Then we'll move on to talk about the drag and the theater scene in Atlanta, and then move on just to more general questions about the state of theater and drag at large. After that, we'll give folks in the room an opportunity to ask any questions they may have, and then we'll send you on your merry way. All right. We're going to start, Paul, talking about your directing work. You've featured a variety of plays and musicals that feature drag queens and or cross-dressing, from Kinky Boots to Priscilla, Queen of the Desert to Psycho Beach Party. I'm wondering, how does the relationship between the character and the actor influence the way that you cast drag roles?
It's interesting because some of the shows that I've directed that have drag roles, some of them specifically call for drag roles, like Priscilla or Kinky Boots. Psycho Beach Party is an example of a show that, when it was written, Charles Busch, who's a legend in queer theater, has been writing since the 1980s. It is not written as a quote drag role. And what I mean with that in theater is that it's not someone donning the clothes of a gender identity that perhaps they don't necessarily identify with on a day-to-day basis, whereas something like Kinky Boots or Priscilla, Queen of the Desert is specifically about that. So in Psycho Beach Party, we actually had two performers in drag in roles that are sometimes traditionally played in drag, sometimes aren't. So I've just kind of have not in a very organic way is what I should say. So it's just kind of become organic in a lot of the shows that I direct that just happen to be drag roles, that gender is kind of broken down. And however a lot of the shows that we produce, we just say, come and audition for whatever role it is that you feel you can best embody. And then we figure it out with costuming and with hair and makeup and whatever. So it's interesting because a lot of the people that have performed with us on stage in productions that have not done drag before have then embraced it as an art form and have continued to do it after the fact, whether that is in other productions, whether that is in drag-centered shows or whatever it might be. So that's really heartwarming to know. I don't necessarily think that there's a direct connection always between the person who's trying out for a role and the role itself. We do have some people that are drag performers. It is part of their professional lives that then perform with us in drag roles and in non-drag roles. So it's not always like a one-to-one type of thing. We're not looking just for drag performers to just play drag roles. I think that that's putting people in too tight of a box. It just kind of has come out organically. And sometimes in the audition process, you realize someone is right for a role, and then the conversation happens with them. What are you comfortable portraying on stage? Things like that. But it's been very interesting to see how, especially in my own art, and I think in theater in general, how drag has kind of infiltrated in a way that it hadn't 15, 20, 25 years ago, that now we're a lot more accepting of just a drag role on stage. And I should say, I say that meaning male presenting people in drag as female presenting characters, because we all know growing up, you're in some elementary or middle school play and they'll put little girls dress up as boys all the time, but you never really see a boy playing Annie or female roles. So
You
I think it's
obviously weren't in
interesting.
my basement, Paul, when I was 10.
I wasn't, or I would have been Miss Hannigan. But you know what I mean? So I think that it's becoming more normal. And I think that, and I know that we'll talk about this later, I think that it's probably the way around a lot of these drag bans that are happening, because these are established plays. These are things, you know, that are licensed and they have long histories. And so I'm hopeful that that is a way that we can politically combat all of this negative energy that's happening towards drag performers. If we're just saying, in a show like Hairspray, for example, it has almost always been done that Edna Turnblad is a drag role. So now you start to get into question of, when drag bans are enacted, does that mean you can't do Hairspray? Does that mean that you can't do those elementary school plays where, you know, younger students that are female are playing, like, so I really think the theater might be kind of the Trojan horse into to fight this argument. At least I hope it is.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, because there is such a clear and like well documented history of
Right.
drag or cross-dressing or whatever you really want to call it, depending on the different uses, in the American theater. So it's something that's really easy to point to folks who want to try and ban this kind of performance, where it's like, this has been going on for literal centuries. Chill out. I am curious, like you said about Psycho Beach Party, where there's characters that are typically played by men who are intended to be perceived by the audience just to be a woman character, a female character. I'm curious about the choice to embody Velma Von Tussle as a drag role, because I think that a lot of the women in Hairspray have a similar drag energy that Edna also has, and the journey of Edna is kind of something that's that having the role be played by a drag queen makes it special. So I'm wondering what you're hoping to bring to the role of Velma.
Well, I will say it is nice when you start a company and you're in charge of it, because then you just say, well, this is what we're doing, and no one can say anything against it. I am not a I'm a director and producer. I've performed before, but it has been a while. But I kind of realized all of the roles that I'm attracted to. Like, I just joked, like, if someone was doing Annie, sign me up. I will play Miss Hannigan any day of the week. It's really more playing the villain, is that I know it would be a lot of fun. I know that the attention of where I'm not normally a performer, it will get people out to see the show that maybe normally don't see it. But we were toying around with the idea again. Why is it that we're saying in Hairspray, Edna is the only drag role? Just because it was Divine in the original movie, why are we saying that that's the only role? And we explored some of the other roles of possibly being drag performers as well. We have I mean, when I tell you, like, the word amazing was written about the person who is playing Motormouth, there is no question about it whatsoever. So she is not a drag role. Honestly, it comes down to that I just wanted to play the villain. And so that's what it was. I've already, next time I see you, Toya, I will show, we did do one painting of me last week, and it came out a little, it was good. It was good. A professional drag queen, Tugboat the Queen, who's playing Edna, painted me. And it came out looking a little campier than we wanted, but it was a lot of fun. I'll show you, Toya, in person. I'm not putting it out on the internet or anything. But to your point, I just want to see more of it. I just want to see more of genderless casting, or not genderless casting, but like not worrying about it. If someone can play the role, we have makeup, we have wigs, we have costumes. We're already in the theater. We're already suspending disbelief. We know that we're not in 1962 Baltimore. We already know that segregation has ended in that way. So why can't there just be however people are falling into these lines? So I don't know. We'll see how it is. I'm practicing on heels. I'm up to like a 2-inch heel, and everyone said Velma's like a 5-inch heel type of girl, so I have to keep working on that.
I think that's going to be a really fun contrast because I think because Edna, at least for the first half or so, three-quarters of the show, is like sort of like the frumpy, dumpy mother before
Right.
she gets the makeover. So I think it's a great and interesting choice to have the foil also be a person in drag. So I'm excited to
One,
hear
it's
how that
amazing.
goes.
And it's amazing because as soon as I said I'm doing the role, I increased our wig and costume budget by like 3 times. I was like, no, our wigs can be nicer this show because I'm going to need a few changes.
Fantastic. All right,
Yeah.
August, let's hear from you, Toya, a bit.
Yeah, so one question we had was, how would you characterize the drag scene in Atlanta specifically as compared to like the other cities that you've performed in? Are there unique aspects of the drag community that you've experienced, or is there any specific thing that you want to point out?
Yeah. One thing I would say about Atlanta and kind of like I'll use Macon in Athens as an example. There are a couple of drag troops in both cities, but that's kind of just it. So there isn't multiple drag bars. As far as Atlanta goes, you can go see all different types of drag all in the same night if you wanted to. Like literally, you could go to Midtown and see a lot more. I don't want to use the word more like showgirl type drag, and then from there you could go to Little Five Points and see more alternative, more artsy drag, and then you could go to EAB and see a collaboration of all types of drag. And so I will say it's very diverse in that sense. And also there could be just multiple shows going on at the exact same time. Whereas like most communities, if you go to the drag show in that town, that is the drag show.
Hmm.
Whereas Atlanta, like I don't want to say it's a whole bunch of competition because the audiences want to go see what they want to go see. Like there are people that would go to Lips, make reservations, go see that show around like 7 or 8 o'clock, and then go home. But there are also people who don't want to go to Lips. They want to go to EAB and be out till like 2 o'clock in the morning, like partying and drinking with the queens and everything. So Atlanta's very unique in that aspect. Like they have the nightlife like drag down. Like it is the perfect atmosphere for that. And like I said, like places like Athens and Macon, like, we'll stay out late, but like we're the only drag show going on. So I mean, when we're done, there's no other drag to go see.
Yeah.
When
Did
you,
that, oh,
oh, sorry.
no, go ahead. Did that like influence your kind of uh evolution into like looking into drag and like being interested in that because you like there's so much around it in Atlanta and like places like that?
No, definitely, because so in Macon we started at one bar, and like that's really where I got my drag start at, and I started in like the fall, and then around February in 2017 the bar closed down for good, or at least it stopped being a gay club, and it just went back to being a normal one.
Hmm.
And so me and my drag sister just went to Atlanta, started doing contests. We made friends there, and going to Atlanta used to be like this really like special like once a month thing. And then just, by when you meet one drag performer, you meet another one, and they start talking, and they get your information. They want you in this, they want you in that. And honestly, I want to say it was quarantine specifically where I got very heavily integrated into the Atlanta drag community because, all we had was, doing like shows on Zoom or on Twitch, on Facebook. Like we did what we could to not only entertain people, but also, gain some type of income while we're stuck at the house. And I want to say just about every drag performer that I've gotten close to, like over the internet, like in that time period, has had me in their show and vice versa.
Mm.
So truly, I do want to say like just being around, like just being around has truly just gotten me where I've gotten as far as my drag career has gone.
Yeah, and specifically like finding that queer community is just like so nice when you finally like click into it. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting sort of how you talk about Atlanta being, you know, obviously the big metropolitan area, and then that's kind of a center of activity. And then there's these smaller cities and towns that are obviously have a queer community that wants to start having events. And as the popularity of drag becomes more accessible, even despite people trying to make it less accessible, um, I'm curious what you see in these smaller towns. Is it a lineup of a bunch of different queens that all do different things, or are you seeing groups where everyone's kind of like cultivating a style together? Versus Atlanta, where it sounds like there's like different venues where you know where you're gonna go to see different kinds of drag.
Yeah, I will. I'll say it's a mix of both. I will say the drag troupe that I quote unquote lead and am a part of. We do we can be very campy, but for the most part we give off very showgirl vibes. But we also don't turn away different types of drag, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like we're kind of this whole can I curse?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. We're kind of this clusterfuck of different types of drag and genres. I don't know, I guess the way we display it, it just looks very we're a collective, I guess. And so our shows you won't see a lot of the same drag. But on the flip side, it just works together, I guess. Like all the different pieces just form like a really good show. Whereas Atlanta, you can see that. I feel like our main thing being like a smaller town is we have a lot of out of town guests, but then we also have a lot of newcomers. We have a lot of people that they want to do drag, but they don't want to do drag like we do drag. Like they want to do they want to see what it's like for a night or do a few gigs as opposed to can I be on cast with you and do this every single weekend?
Right.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is something that both like the internet and then also television shows beyond Drag Race, even with Dragula and Camp Wanakiki and oh gosh, what's the show in Canada? You know, there's so many different
Canada's Drag Race.
well, there's that. Yeah. No, there was some sort of Call Me Mother it was called that Peppermint was on.
Oh, yes, yes. Okay.
There's so many different big platforms for drag queens. So I think that people actually, as audience members, want to see the variety. I think there's like a comfort in knowing you can go to like the show bar to see the showgirls. But I think that era may be in the past. I think it's more sellable to have something for everyone because we're working towards more diverse and inclusive queer spaces. So I think in order to foster that in the audience, you need to also be fostering that on the stage. So it's exciting to hear just the way things are shifting. On that note, our last kind of getting to know you question for both of you to answer is looking ahead, what new projects and initiatives are you the most excited about for the future? Any upcoming works or collaborations you're really looking forward to?
Well, I'm in Hairspray, and so that's going to happen no matter what. But I am excited for it. And after that, we actually are doing a show in December. Our holiday shows are always very campy, very offbeat, very queer. And we're doing a show called Murder on the Polar Express. And it was written by, if anyone has been up to Boston before, Ryan Landry and the Gold Dust Orphans have been doing drag and parody and camp for a couple of decades. So, growing up in Boston, I've seen many of their shows. And last summer, I was able to connect with Ryan, and he gave his blessing for us to produce this show of his that he wrote several years ago. And once we do this show, we do a good job, then his catalog is basically open to us to be able to perform. So I'm very, very excited about that. After that, we're also doing a world premiere musical based on the movie Trick from 1999. If anyone remembers that movie, it was a very sweet gay rom com, literally just about two boys that meet and they spend the whole night trying to find a place to hook up. And about 3 years ago, I thought, hey, this would make a great musical. Somehow found the screenwriter's email online, sent him the blindest and coldest of emails of just like, I run a theater. You want to make this into a musical? And for 3 years, he's been adapting it, and we're doing the world premiere of it, which I'm really excited about. We have all that coming up, and then we just have a constant barrage of shows. One of the things that I was thinking about when Utoya was talking, and Utoya's performed here, I don't know how many times at this point, but we do a show here. Right now it's once a quarter. I hope to do it more regularly. And we call it Drag Reflex. And it is a 100% lip sync free drag show. So the performers can sing live. We've had stand-up comedy, instruments, sketches. I'm trying to find a drag performer that does magic, maybe. So it's a way to highlight the many versatile talents that drag performers have, because I think in some people's mind, a drag performer just puts on their drag, lip syncs to a song, goes and changes and come out and sings another song. And that's wonderful, but there's so many more things that drag performers can do. So we're trying to build this show to show those many different assets. And Utoya's done it 2 or 3 times. We've only done it 2 or 3 times, I think.
I think like twice. No, yeah, 3 times, 3 times, 3 times, 3 times.
3
You're
times.
Right. Yes.
So, yeah.
Fantastic.
So that's what we have coming up. Yeah.
It's a great reminder with the trick adaptation to even to academics and artists in any way that like that cold email might be just the thing that leads you to create the thing that you thought was a pipe dream, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, the worst thing that could have happened was he read it and didn't respond, and I would have been producing something else. But now there's a new queer musical, and they're writing it with 8 people and a 4-piece band because they want to be very producible on every aspect. And there actually is a drag role in it. If anyone has seen the movie, Coco Peru was in the original movie. Coco Peru is not doing our version. I would like to make that very clear. But yeah, you know, just send that email, just make that phone call. The worst thing that's going to happen is you hear no, and then you just go on your merry way.
Yeah. All right, Utoya, what are you looking forward to?
Actually here we are in September, we have Making Pride coming up, and it is on its like I want to say like 6th year. Yeah, like 6th year, like actively happening. And we're having Latrice Royale and also Lala Reed from Drag Race headlining. That's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm also in some other pageants.
Chasing the crowns.
I don't have a lot of things to announce, but just I'm taking it day by day.
Upcoming secret projects.
She comes up here and she's like, I've booked this show and then I got to leave here at this time because I got to get to this other show. I've seen her in like the same outfit in like 3 different shows on one night.
I do not turn down a check. Let me tell you that. I will say that one thing.
I know.
Turn down a check.
Awesome.
All right. I think we can sort of move on and hear a bit more specifically about Atlanta.
Sweet. So for the first question, Paul, as like a founding member of City of Atlanta's LGBTQ plus advisory board and board chair for Out at Georgia, how have you seen change in the past several years for queer performing artists in Atlanta? Also, like interested in hearing how things have changed since the 2020 shutdowns.
Yeah. So first, so that everyone understands the playing field that we are on, Georgia ranks 52nd in arts funding per capita in the country, meaning that we spend less per capita, even lower than Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. So last fiscal year budget, the state of Georgia spent 14 cents a person on arts funding. So the arts are not that well supported in our state. Fulton County, where Atlanta is located, is having discussions about cutting their arts funding in half from 3 million to 1.5 million. So as Mrs. Lovett says in Sweeney Todd, times are hard. Times is hard. I should say it correctly. But I think that forces us to get creative in that we have a wonderful main stage space that seats 149 people. We have a very large lobby space, and we did some work to it where we can now set up table seating for about 55 people for a cabaret space. So we can set it up and break it down. And that's what we've done Drag Reflex and other shows, so that if something is going on in our main stage, we can still have something going on in our lobby on off nights or whatever it might be. Opening it up to free events sometimes to just get people in the door and interested in what we're doing, maybe make a little money on the bar or something like that. So I think it's really important to do things like that. Since the shutdown, as a theater maker, my mind has been, what is theater? And to me, it is just a space where people gather for stories. I don't think it's a place where you only see plays. I think you see plays, you see drag shows, you see movies, there are concerts. Utoya has hosted karaoke here before. So it's just a gathering place for people to be able to share stories. So that's what I think. It's hard. It's very hard. And I'm very aware of the news. Unfortunately, just in Tennessee, the Sixth Circuit Court reversed the decision on the drag ban. So now essentially the drag ban in Tennessee is back on. So this literally just happened like 3 or 4 days ago. So I'm looking at going to Memphis to connect with Friends of George's, which is the drag performance group in Memphis that was able to overturn the drag ban last year, but now unfortunately it's fallen back. So, in being someone who has come from a very, very liberal state in Massachusetts to coming to, we're not the most conservative of states in Georgia, but we're, higher on the list. It's scary sometimes, and it's a little hard. When we apply for funding, we make sure that we avoid using the word queer on applications, just because we don't know who is reading it and if they will be offended by that word. So it's almost like code switching at times, that you're trying to balance, this is the art that we're making and this is what we want to do, but in order to do that, we have to play by these rules. I mean, we get people driving from south of Macon, from Alabama, who come to our shows, which is wonderful. But the industry as a whole has not bounced back from the pandemic. And I'm as guilty of it as anything. My husband and I on Saturday were like, do we want to go to the movies? And then we were like, well, what can we watch on our 75-inch TV? And I was like, well, we can buy a movie on Apple TV for $10 that we haven't seen, or we can go and spend $30 on 2 tickets. And so it's just, we somehow have to get back as a society to that collective, we want to experience things together. And one of the ways that I'm trying to push audiences to do that is that our season that we have coming up starting in October with Hairspray, the entire season is very happy, is very light. I've told everyone, you will come, you will smile, you will laugh, you will know that everything is going to work out at the end of this play. Yes, you might learn a little something, but I think that we have to I think the greatest gift that we as theater makers, as drag performers, anything right now, is making people laugh and smile. I think that's the most important thing that we all need in this election year, with everything happening around the world with conflicts, with everything happening within our country with conflicts. I think that we have to focus on joy. And that's how I'm trying to get people back in. And I hope it works. So my Velma drag might be a little funnier, just so I can be like, come and look at me. I look this ridiculous. I'm kidding. She's going to be fabulous. She's literally going to be like a glamazon.
I think it is such important work to open up the doors in the way that you have. I think you make a great point by saying, like, as a theater organization, you have this space, you have this lobby, and it is something that I've seen in other regional theaters across the country, where they have started using their lobby as a cabaret space and as a community space. And so to follow up on that, Utoya, I'm curious to hear if you have had any experiences since working with Outfront and since Outfront has been a part of the local community. I'm curious to hear about any times that you've seen the theater company impact the drag world, and then vice versa, how the drag queens that have been brought into Outfront have impacted what Outfront does.
Oh, definitely. So two of the cast members of Kinky Boots, like I knew like personally before the production happened, and that was Miss Cookie Delight and JC Rocket, and both of them are just very like when I've talked to them both. We have had endless conversations about like musical theater, our favorite musicals, and stuff like that. And so, well, and I say all this, and I unfortunately did not go see that production. However, I have seen how musical theater and everything influences their drag heavily, and mine as well. Because I mean, I'm a theater queen. Like that's what got me into drag to begin with. But like people like them, people like Tugboat. Like the first and unfortunately the only show I've seen at Outfront was Ruthless, and Tugboat played Sylvia, which is a role that is a drag role, and she owned it. She knocked it out of the park. She just exuded what uh what drag is, and also what drag can be in a musical theater setting. And so like Outfront is just definitely that they have definitely put some very talented queens on, and then those queens also have just represented that theater very well. Like I unfortunately do not live in Atlanta, but if I did, like you would catch me. You catch me. I don't know who's playing Motormouth Maybell, but if you brought the keys down a little bit, I would love to like like that would be so much fun to do. Like that's the one thing I haven't done with my drag personally is like do it in an actual production. But like seeing them do it, like no, they do it very well, and like I said, it is represented in their drag.
You do bring up a great point with the keys of the songs situation, because I think there's has not been a whole lot of movement on these like licensing organizations parts to join the 21st century, where you can transpose multiple scores with the click of a button. And I think it would open up the doors to so many more creative reimagining of a bunch of different roles, like we're seeing in commercial theater right now with Jinx Monsoon taking on Chicago and Little Shop of Horrors, and hopefully every other major musical theater role she can get her hands on. So yeah, I do hope that there are ways that with LGBT theater companies producing more works with these creative reimaginings, showing the rights holders that this is something that doesn't create the financial burden of the labor of changing keys in the way that it has in the past. So hopefully we can see a lot more shift in that direction, and a
Yeah,
lot of it has to do with the people who own the rights, especially to old musicals.
yeah, and I think even beyond, out of the realm of talking about drag roles, where we have people, performers who may be transitioning or have transitioned, and we know that vocal ranges are one of the things that may not transition as much as other parts of the body do. So I do think that companies are slowly catching on. Back in 2017, we produced the Rocky Horror Show. And the director's idea was that the aliens, so Frankenfurter and Riff Raff and Magenta, basically gender didn't mean anything to the aliens. And Earthlings were very focused on gender. And we had a female play Frankenfurter, not queer, not trans, a female performer. Wonderful, wonderful performer. And at the end of the show, I got an email from Samuel French, who owned the rights at that point. Now it's Concord Theatricals. And they basically said that we had broken our contract and that we would not be allowed to do any more shows from them, and that they could take legal action. And I responded saying, we did not break our contract. We did not change a single word in the script. And I pointed to examples. I said, when Frankenfurter first appears, no pronouns are used. I said, we did not change any pronouns or anything. We simply had a female person playing that role. And they backed right down because they were like, you're right. We can't, there's no argument for that anymore. So Mark, to your point, I think companies are it's going to become more and more commonplace that options are available, but it is slow. I think that you have to have people like the most recent Broadway revival of Company, where Bobby was played by a female instead of a male performer. So now that Sondheim was like, hey, that's okay, I think you'll start to see other people be like, yeah, it's fine. We can change the keys. We can do whatever. It doesn't hurt the show at all.
Another great example is the Cats Jellicle Ball production happening in New York, where, I think it was Cameron Mackintosh was the one that originally said that he felt that performances of shows that he had worked on shouldn't feature trans performers in them. And because the PAC NYC was able to make such a strong argument for the show appearing exactly as written, just placing it on these trans bodies, these Black bodies, and this diverse cast in a way that they didn't change a single thing. And it's the same as the acclaimed revival of Oklahoma that happened. It's a very similar modal transformation that they did.
Hell, Cats got better reviews.
Yeah. And may run longer. So it is certainly an exciting time in that way. All right, where are we in this doc?
Wait, I just had a quick question because what I've always been interested in this topic is like new works, and like how do you guys like feel that like new works can kind of add to this idea of like genderless, or like you can put any bodies in any role, and like how can like that facilitate that, I guess?
I think creators now are specifically writing. I've seen a lot more notes in new plays that I'm reading of this role is named X, but it could also be named Y. And if it's named Y, just change the pronouns and maybe change these two lines or whatever. So, but I think I think that's great from an equality standpoint. I also just think it's a smart business choice from authors that they're saying, you may not have a plethora of this type of people to pull from, so just change it into this. I directed a play, like 13 years ago. I don't know, I'm making up years. A farce, a Ken Ludwig play called On the 20th, just 20th Century, which the musical On the 20th Century is based on. And there's one role that was written as a male role, but they were like, or if you have a female performer, just name her this and change whatever you have to. So I'm seeing more and more authors doing that when it's appropriate. Sometimes it's just not appropriate. Sometimes gender is a specific thing. That gender identity, whether it is male, female, non-binary, transgender, expansive, what have you, that is part of the narrative. And I think that when that is part of the narrative, it is important to stay true to that. But I just think some people are like, or like take Cats for an example. No one cares the gender of any of the cats. If the person can be
They're cats.
Mistopheles, it can be old Deuteronomy, who cares? Put on the cat suit or put on whatever and get out there.
And just be better than the movie was.
Well, I mean, that's pretty easy to do.
Especially as we're in an era where regional theaters especially are, in extreme crisis. I think it is important to see that playwrights especially are recognizing that we don't have the privilege of being precious about these things, precious about the work that we're writing and putting out for other people to interpret. I think and by being able to provide them options, we are expanding the breadth of productions that can happen of the work. So that is another exciting thing to hear. All right, I think we're gonna move on to our last segment on just the general state of theater and state of drag. And I am always very interested in the ways that these worlds talk to each other, because I started as a musical theater performer and then found drag, and now have kind of shifted back into the theater world in the academic sector. And so pedagogy plays a huge role in what we do here at ATHE. And as theater educators, I think it's imperative to maintain a connection to the industry at large that we're sending our students out into. What do you see, Paul, in young actors that excites you? And what do you think that the generation of actors that are training right now are missing when they enter the job market?
So I've actually taught every grade from preschool through college, literally every single grade. I hate third grade. That was not the year for me. First grade, fine. Second grade, fine. Third and fourth grade, I was like not into. The students that I've worked with on the collegiate level, I don't think that they're realistic. I don't think that they're always willing to do the work. I think that I'm just going to give you a very brief example. We just cast Hairspray. We have our rates that we're paying everyone. And one person, a young person who just graduated, came back. I'm all for performers advocating for themselves. Absolutely should. But ended up asking for almost double the weekly rate, which would have put them as an ensemble member ahead of what the leads were getting. And it just leaves a taste in my mouth. And I'm like, I'm glad you're advocating for yourself, but you're just not realistic. And I think everyone has to be paid their worth. Everyone, I want fair wages for everyone. But I just don't think a lot of young performers are realistic in what they can get and what they can do. In that, you're not going to step off of a stage always in college. Sometimes yes, and be the star of something. Like, it's sometimes starting over, and you have to take the roles that are going to build you up and build your resume. I just see a lot of people that come out and they're like, I want this, and I'm only taking this, and I'm not going to work if I don't have this. If that's your choice, that's fine. But I worry that, how are you going to build your resume? How are you going to make these connections? How are you going to get your foot in the door with these companies if you're not willing to be at least a little flexible? I think there's a lot of great performers, a lot of great programs that are happening. But I just hope that educators, and being an educator myself, I just want the performers to be realistic and to also say, yes, you're a performer. Is there something else in the world of theater that you really love doing, so that when you're not performing, you can say, hey, I know that I wasn't cast. Are you looking for a costume assistant? Because I love working in costumes, and earn some money that way and get in with a company that way. So, it's a hard thing to answer, because I think some young performers and students, they get it right away. And then some of them, I just see them struggling for years, and they're just not changing their path. They're saying, I'm 23 and I want to play Sweeney Todd in Sweeney Todd. You're probably not going to play Sweeney Todd at 23 in a professional production. But, so I don't know. I don't think I'm answering the question very well. I want young people to have more information, be open to the information, and to find how they can get themselves ahead, and know that sometimes it might be a harder climb. It might be a path of more resistance, because they'll eventually get there.
I think that very much aligns with sort of my experience leaving a BFA musical theater program, where the program was pretty good at teaching us how to be strong artists and how to, have a unique perspective and how to tackle a role and the technical aspects of the job of an actor. But I think what they struggled with, especially as a school that was pretty far removed from a metropolitan area, was that professional development. So I think that is as we continually try to like recharge and re-energize the artistic aspect of what we're teaching our students, because there's obviously a lot of work to make the acting training specifically world more accessible, inclusive, safe, consent based. There's also this professional development aspect that is a hard nut to crack. And so I guess we'll just keep at it. And I do think providing students with a realistic perspective on what it's like to enter the theater job market is really important, because I don't know that anyone beyond sort of like the scare tactic of like, look to your left and look to your right, neither of the people next to you is going to make their money doing theater. Like, they do that on the first day of these programs sometimes, and then like never talk about it again, and it's like it doesn't set anybody up for success, I don't think.
Right. And I think they should know as well. I mean, we're in 2024. We are a national and international network of theater makers and directors now, where I will get a resume from someone and, they have gone to school in another city, and I know an artistic director in that other city, and I see that theater on there, and I'm texting that artistic director while I'm doing casting going, what was your experience with this person? We're looking at them for a role. There's no more, yes, like Atlanta, we're an insular community, but I have friends that are artistic directors in Chicago and Los Angeles and in Southern Florida and in Richmond, Virginia, and I get people's resumes. The artistic director in Fort Lauderdale just last week texted me and saying, hey, someone just submitted for our production of the Fantastics and they've done 3 shows with you. What's your opinion of her? And I was like, she's wonderful. So students need to know that too, is that if you're going to be a part of something, give it your all, because if you're not going to give it your all, people are going to know, and it's not just going to be the people immediately around you that know.
Great.
Sweet. So, I think there's another question for you, Toya. Drag is such a transformative experience. Can you share a moment from your career where you felt particularly proud of the impact you made on the audience and on the drag community?
Ooh, hmm. I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Just repeat that question one more time. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Drag is a transformative experience. Can you share a moment from your career where you felt particularly proud of the impact you made on an audience or the drag community? If there was like a night that like stood out to you as like something that like sunk in deep, or a moment that you look back fondly on.
Okay. I definitely want to do, perfect example. Okay. So the first year that we did, like, making Pride was a thing obviously before us, but like it hadn't been like a whole like festival since like I want to say the late 80s, 90s. And so it came back around 2019. And so in 2019, it was just a 1-day thing in the middle of like a park downtown. And originally was just supposed to be like a drag queen story hour, but it ended up turning into like a full show. And just in that moment, like, I think that's just the first time I've had gotten a chance to actually perform for Pride. And a lot of people will walk up to you and like tell you like, oh, I had a great time, this and everything. But other people will walk up and say, no, this meant a lot to me because I got to like experience something that I've never seen before. Like, me as a queer person got to actually celebrate being queer. And like, I got to watch you having so much fun, and like, that's how I want to feel every day. Like, how I feel in this moment is how I want to feel every day. And it made me feel very special. And as a matter of fact, in saying all that, I actually do have a better answer. Recently, sorry, recently, a lady from Americus reached out to me, and she said that she wanted to have a drag show for Pride Month. And she was very honest with me. She was like, no, this area, it's not that they're not queer friendly. It's just that we don't do anything like openly queer, like anywhere. There hasn't been any drag shows, no real pride celebrations. Like, this town has just never seen anything like that. And so she invited us to perform in her restaurant. And two things. One, that is the most busy her restaurant has ever been any time it has been opened. And two, this is a little side point, but like, the AC was out the entire time we were doing the show, and she straight up told us at the end of the show the reason why is because the people that were going to come and fix it saw that she was going to have a drag show, and they felt some type of way, so they said, you need to cancel that. She refused, so they refused to fix her air. But back to the point of the show, people walked up to us all night and were just like saying how happy they were that they had a place to go to. They said, this town sucks. They said it multiple times the entire time we were hosting this drag show. America sucks. There is nothing out here. And like, being that special to a complete group of strangers while I'm just doing what I love, and also like getting paid to do it. Cause like, I'll be honest, it was kind of just another gig for me, but it turned into something a lot more. Just having so many people walking up to you, telling how like how appreciative they are of you, slash also how like they just never seen this many queer people in one room, and feel so comfortable and free, but also safe. And honestly, that is something it was literally just last month, and that's gonna stick with me for a hot minute.
I think it's
Sorry,
like
it took me
so
so long to
special.
get to that point. I just couldn't. I'm like, what's a moment like that? That moment, that one right there.
It is
I,
those small town shows and those small town prides, especially. There's a very unique energy about the the community. There's like a chosen family thing. Like, it's a person you're walking past on the street every other day of the year, but when you see them at Pride, like, they stop and ask if you want to have a hug. You know what I mean? There's just so many special interactions that happen because we're just labeling a weekend Pride and all showing up together, and it is a great reminder of how the collective action of a group of marginalized people can really change a lot. And with that, I think that's a fabulous note to sort of move on to our Q&A portion. So if anyone joining us in the audience has any questions for you, Toya or Paul, or any comments or any thoughts, feel free to speak now.
You can tell the two of us are not shy, so just shout them out.
Hi, I'm Dan Smith. I'm in East Lansing, Michigan. I teach at Michigan State University, and I was really interested in the ideas around casting and drag because I directed a production of Kate Hamill's adaptation of Sense and Sensibility in 2018 that I'm going to be talking about at the conference, actually. But and one thing that happened was a lot of the men in the production were in drag, but I also had cast one role, Mrs. Jennings, as with a non-binary performer who I actually didn't know was non-binary at the time, but who now is a drag performer in New York City under the name Maxi Padding, if you want to look them up. And anyway, I was really curious about, I guess, the differences between comedic drag, sort of the man in a dress joke, versus kind of more respectful, or I guess it felt to me like we got a nasty letter from one audience member about this was marketed as family friendly and it wasn't family friendly. How dare you? And I feel like what that was coming from was the perception of Mrs. Jennings more as a transgender woman in the world of the play than as safe, right? Making fun of gender drag performer. Anyway, I just feel like that's something that's, I don't know that I have a big question, but I guess that's the question. Yeah, it's like, what's the difference between where are we now in terms of as there are fewer, and all those boundaries have always not been there, I guess, between drag performers and transgender people, but I think that's becoming more visible, I guess, in this moment. And so I'm curious about if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think that the world that we live in now, I think because drag is villainized by so many people, I do feel like, I don't want to say it's easier or safer to make it that comedic type of thing, but it seems like that's the spoonful of sugar to be like, hey, it's okay, like, look, we're kind of funny type of thing. I do think that when you get into more dramatic roles, we're starting to understand more. And this is actually something that I've been thinking and talking to people about: authentic casting. So we try to cast queer roles with queer people, but of course, we don't ask people how they identify. You can't look at a person and know that they are queer. If you knew how many times I'm like, okay, sometimes Utoya, but like not always. You don't want to assume. My casting director and I were sitting next to each other, and I just go, pull up their Instagram, and we're scrolling, and I'm like, there he is in a tank top with a rainbow flag. That's good enough. Like we're gonna take that as a win. Because there are things that, like, it is not appropriate for a cisgender person to play a trans role, and that was not the case even 10 years ago. And I would say that's not even always the case now. A lot of other queer theaters around the country that I'm connected with, they're not in major markets. And so now here is the question: do we produce a show about trans, non-binary issues and narratives and not have any trans or non-binary performers in it? Or do we not tell those stories because we cannot tell them as authentically? And it's a very fine line, because they want to bring those stories to the stage to humanize them, to expose an audience to these issues. But it's that struggle. It's that, like, but we don't have any trans non-binary performers, or we don't have any trans non-binary performers that can play the role type of thing. So I don't know. I know that you don't have like a full question. I don't know if I have a full answer on it. I will say here, I'm going through my brain. I don't think that we've done anything dramatic with a drag role. There's nothing that pops out in my head. I actually can't even think of like a major commercial. I'm like quickly going through like Broadway shows that I know about, and I can't really think of any as well. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't happen, because we're talking about authentic representation, and we're talking about, now that we have all, as an industry, have collectively thought about color conscious casting, then we should be thinking about gender conscious casting and things like that. Of just, it doesn't matter how a performer identifies if they're the best performer for that role. But then that contradicts with what I just said. Like, is it appropriate at times? And I don't know. I don't have an answer to your non-question, is what I'm saying.
We have a
But
lot of
I will say this.
Oh, go
I
ahead.
learned this years ago in our first season, because our first season, we got the most fabulous story ever told. I had over 60,000 people protesting us with letters and emails and phone calls and Facebook messages. And I found a rock with a note outside and all of that. And as soon as all that started happening, then I knew we were doing something right. So the fact that at least one person wrote you a letter to complain means you were doing something right, because there were probably 10 people that was really impactful for, and they didn't say anything about it. So save those letters. I have a couple threatening letter somewhere on my desk right now that I save.
We have a lot of conversations about the canon in the academy and like what is worth keeping around, what we need to leave behind. And I spend a lot of time thinking about the man in a dress trope that you see in a lot of like mid-century entertainments, like Some Like It Hot, or even like as far as Miss Doubtfire, where it's like the joke is that that's a guy pretending to be a woman. And I think as we progress, hopefully we'll start seeing that our audiences are more educated on like why that isn't okay or helpful, especially to the transgender community. And um one example I'm thinking of is I was teaching a class, like a drag 101 course, to a bunch of folks who had never done drag before, and I wanted to teach them about like the history of comedy queens. And so I was showing them a scene from The Mystery of Irma Vep, Charles Ludlam play, and it's a good clip and the scene is funny, and I don't think he as a playwright did anything to encourage this reaction, but it's a video from I think like 2010 of a production, and the second the character in drag walks on stage, the audience is like erupting in laughter. And so I hope that we start to see like that being the automatic reaction changing. And in my head I'm thinking about, again, I'll bring up Jinx Monsoon, how the reaction to Jinx Monsoon entering the stage as Mama Morton isn't laughter, but like uproarious applause, because she's energized a base of people who like obviously were probably already familiar with Chicago, but probably weren't going to buy a ticket to that production of Chicago on Broadway that's been running for 30 years. So hopefully we can look back in another 10 years or something and see that that is the reaction that we're going for. And I think that as like producers, as playwrights, as actors, and as directors, as designers even, it's important to think about how we can mitigate that reaction. So that's a conversation I had with those students was, what might you have done differently to change how the audience is perceiving this character? Because it can still definitely be a hilarious drag role without relying on tropes that are ultimately harmful to people who are transitioning or have transitioned.
Yeah, and I think there's a big difference in most instances. We're talking about Hairspray. Edna is a role, traditionally a drag role. So it is not a man like in the world, it is a man in a dress. But in the world of Hairspray, it is not a man in a dress. It is just a female character. So I think that there's a line between that and, say, Mrs. Doubtfire or Tootsie, these shows that are, I am a man in the show and I am putting on a dress to pretend to be a woman, type of thing. And again, it goes back to what I was talking about much earlier. The reaction to that is much more extreme than if there was a play of a woman putting on men's clothes and pretending to be, in I don't know, Every Other Shakespeare. I can't, As You Like It or something. There's a female character putting on men's clothes and being like, I'm actually a boy. And it doesn't get that reaction. So that difference is really interesting. Why in our society, not ours, but I'm using ours in the greater sense, like our brains are triggered to be like, haha, that's a man in a dress, but not, haha, that's a woman in trousers. So, I definitely think it's an interesting conversation. And Mark, to your point, I think we're progressing. I think, Some Like It Hot on Broadway was definitely better than Mrs. Doubtfire and Tootsie. Was it great? No, it was better. It's that slow trudge to where we get there. It's not a light switch. It's never going to be a light switch.
That's a great point, because when those shows come out and when you see people promoting them and enjoying them, and it can be so frustrating. But it is a good point that these like small incremental changes are happening and won't necessarily, I hope, seem as small in retrospect. Are there any other questions out in the Zoom sphere? No? Nothing?
Hello.
Oh, hi. Hello.
Hi. I'm Nicholas Shannon. I'm the conference planner for the LGBT focus group. And I was interested in something that you said earlier, Paul, about just the role of joy and laughter, particularly in these kind of scary political times. I think in the advocacy spaces that I've been kind of involved in, the tone is just really serious, and like we need to like buckle down and focus on all of the things happening. So I'm wondering, and I think I'd like to hear from both you and Yatoya. Can you say a little bit more about the role of joy, particularly in difficult times for queer community?
Yeah, like very personally speaking, there's just so much weight that I try to allow myself as a person the opportunity to disconnect and laugh. I'm very big into like sitcoms from the 80s. I know it's like the cheesiest thing, but in my brain, it just gives me a break to know in 30 minutes, whatever problems these characters are going through, they're going to work out. Maybe it's a to be continued, but like 2 episodes and we're good. I think that we have to, we talk all the time about, and as theater people, as performers, we're very bad at it, but you need to take a vacation so you can recharge, so you can go back and do your best. So I look at these escapes of coming to a show like Hairspray, watching old episodes of The Facts of Life, doing whatever it is that brings you just a little bit of joy as like that mini vacation. But it's more than that to me because I know even if I'm watching that episode of whatever for the 100th time, of Will and Grace for the 100th time, and it's just randomly on TV, there's someone else. In fact, there are many people watching the same episode at the same time and they're laughing at the same time. And that makes me feel just like a hair better because I know then when that episode is over, I'm going to look at my phone and be like, what the fuck is on fire now? Like, what are we dealing with now? So I just find that joy and laughter is a way to recharge, even if it's just like a little, like when your phone is about to die and you're like, I have 3 minutes to try and get like 2% more out of it. That's all I'm looking for. I'm looking for 2%. I'm not trying to get to 100. I'm literally just like, great, I can get home now with this charge and then I can plug it in. So to me, that's what, that's what joy is for me.
I would say for me, like I know this is very, very cliche coming from the drag performer, but like I just love insanely stupid, campy drag, like stuff that just has you like bowling over, like these drag queen mixes that just have like even a mix where it's just like somebody like walking, but like you just hear footsteps for like 5 minutes, like just like the stupidest things, but like things that just make me smile. Like when me and my drag sister are hosting a drag show together, like there are times when like our little bit back and forth on the mic will just run on a little too long and it'll piss off everybody backstage, but everybody in the audience is just dying laughing, like spitting out their drinks at like the stupid things we say back and forth. Like I just like to surround myself around people who don't take themselves too seriously. Like, because like I said, I'm a very unserious person. Like, I understand that we were in a panel right now, and so like I'm glad my microphone is muted because there's been a few times Paul will say something and I'm just like, nope, nope, nope. Let me keep it to myself. Let me be professional. But like no, I just like to laugh, and some of the best humor is unfortunately, comes at the wrong times. But like I don't know, I find humor in everything. Like I try not to take life too seriously. Like, I think we all, struggle with a bit of whether it's seasonal depression. Like I have seasonal depression every season. But like we all have like a lot going on just in our daily lives. And like Paul said, like, we need to take time to like relax and just have a good laugh. Like just have a moment to ourselves where we know everything will be all right before we go back into the stuff that isn't.
But I mean, the expression "laughter is the best medicine" exists for a reason. So I mean,
Exactly.
that's just it. Laughter is the
And
best medicine.
and ultimately, I think that's why they are trying to ban drag, because they know that like it's this incredibly powerful tool that can not only be used to make people laugh, but use that laughter, that unseriousness to put on display the hypocrisy that surrounds us in the structures of this society that have done everything that they can to prevent us from expressing this the way we want to. And we're able to simply laugh in the face of it. And that is a really dangerous political and social tool. And so it is an important reminder that as much as quote unquote serious drag has a place, doing the the serious ballad and having a speech on the mic to mobilize your audience to make sure that they're registering to vote or standing up for the people in their community when they see them being marginalized. We can also juxtapose a humor and an irreverence that allows people to like rewire their brain and realize that like there's a revolutionary power of queerness that has always existed and that we've watched actively and rapidly change society. And so, yeah, the laughter is like maybe the most powerful part because it disarms, I think.
And I think that's like one of the things that like Dragon Theater does best is it brings people together in a community sense and gives us a chance to laugh with each other in a space that we like can feel safe in. And that's like something that we don't get.
Laugh or cry too, which are
Yeah.
like essentially the same things. Sometimes they happen at the same time.
In Steel Magnolias, in the movie Dolly Parton, she says laughter through tears is her favorite emotion.
Yeah.
So same
And
thing. Yeah.
RuPaul says that all the time, that laughter is healing power. RuPaul, the most perfect drag queen in the world who's never done any environmental terrorism.
Never, no fracking or anything. No, not at all.
All right.
Never gatekeep drag, never transphobic, never any of those things.
Never, nothing like that at all. I feel like we're in a safe space. I say this all the time. I will say this in a safe space. I feel like every day RuPaul wakes up, opens his eyes, and just says, "Thank God Divine died," because Divine was on that trajectory, had music out, was in movies, and I feel like was really fucking around with gender a lot more than.
And arguably a better entertainer, but we're gonna move on.
We're gonna move on. It's fine. It's all good.
Well, I do actually think that the queer joy and laughter topic may be the perfect way to wrap up this fantastic panel. So unless there's any pressing comments or concerns, I will say a huge thank you to Paul and Utoya and to August and to Nicholas and the LGBTQ focus group. A link to Utoya's Spotify, very important. Make sure to stream, follow on the Instagram, and keep an eye out for Outfront Theater while you're in Atlanta and when you return to Atlanta after the conference. Alrighty. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.